Why even bother with advanced whitening? There are lots and lots of good reasons, but for me, the blue one really is the key thing. The fact that when you know you can deliver brilliant results every time, it's a lot easier to talk about it. Just if you think to your own practice, anything you're really, really good at, you end up doing a lot of, because you can talk about it with confidence. Of course, you can charge more, you can get, better word of mouth. All of that stuff's true, but the blue on that confidence really for me is the key. We'll be going through some clinical cases in part 2, and I'll be showing you some cases like this one and going through why this one is easier than it looks. And we'll talk about, why is this one easier? And then there are cases like this one, which is actually a lot more difficult than it might look at first glance. And we'll go through the reasons for that. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a good idea of what's easy with us. That would take 2 weeks. What's difficult, which take 4 weeks. And what to tell the patient about all those questions that we said. The more traditional difficulties, people have always banging on about grey teeth being difficult. We haven't logged grey teeth as a problem. We have logged 6 other clinical situations. And even out of those 6, there's a couple that you particularly need to look out for. So all of that will come in part 2. So don't worry, we'll get to the clinical section. In part 1, we're going to go through the system itself, how to use everything. So let's answer those important questions from the beginning. How white will my teeth go? With Enlighten, 98% will go to B1 or whiter. How long will that take? 95% will get there in 2 weeks. So the other 5% will take 4 weeks. We'll show you in detail how you can tell which is which. How long will it last for the patient? The answer is forever. There is top up, but the point is, if the patient does the top up the way that you tell them to do it, which will come up on the next slide, it doesn't matter what they eat or drink or smoke, the teeth will continue to be the same color forever. So what is that top up regime? Every patient is going to get 1 syringe per year for top up. In the first year, they'll use that syringe for 6 nights, so 1 night every 2 months. They've done that. In the second year, they can reduce a bit. From year 3 onwards, in the long run, 2 nights a year to keep the teeth white. But remember, whichever year they're in, they're still going to need a new syringe, because the shelf life on the syringe won't let it go from year to year. So even if they've got gel left, as they will have when they get to this point, they can't keep using that syringe. They'll need a new one. A lot of practices will give the first one for free as part of an offer. You can get it for free from us as well. But if you're going to charge for them, most practices charge 50 or 60 pounds per syringe. Enlighten syringes are larger than most other syringes. So 1 syringe lasts 1 week during treatment or 1 year during top-up. There's no need to change diet. Your patient can eat or drink or smoke or whatever. It makes no difference either to the color we're going to get to or to how long that color is going to last. So if you've got 2 different whitening systems, I definitely don't recommend 3 different whitening systems. It really confuses everyone. But if you've got 2 different whitening systems in your practice, the natural question is, what's the difference? And there are some things which are easy to talk about. There are other things that are true, but not so easy to talk about. So the easy things to talk about are these 4. The guaranteed result, no dietary change, lasts forever. It definitely works twice as fast as all the other whitening systems. Then there are other things which are true, but not so easy to talk about. So it definitely is a low sensitivity system, but we don't tell patients that. You tell a patient low sensitivity, you just disappoint them as soon as they get any sensitivity at all. They tend to just translate that into no sensitivity. You tend to get a more even result from the tip to the neck. That's super important, because the biggest complaint by a long way with whitening is the neck not as white as the tip. But that's not easy to explain to a patient at the outset. You tend to get a lot fewer complications. White spots, chalkiness, opacities, all of that stuff. Again, not easy to discuss at the beginning. If you are lucky enough or clever enough to get the patient to want teeth whitening, then with Enlighten, what the sentiment that needs to be behind your voice is, if you're going to do it right. The main problem, though, is most of us don't even get to this point. Once you're at that point, then it's pretty easy. But we're going to discuss right at the end in the marketing section how to get the patient to getting to that point of saying, yes, I want teeth whitening. What should you charge for this higher level of service? You can charge what you like. We don't set a price. But do understand, we get asked the price something like 70 or 80 times every day. So it's difficult because we don't set a price. But in general, you want to charge around £200 more for Enlighten than you charge for regular tray whitening. So £400 to £600, where most people are for Enlighten Home, followed by Enlighten Office. It's a combination system. We start with home whitening and finish with office whitening, kind of the opposite direction to the other combination systems. Another way of looking at it is to charge whatever you charge for a crown. There's definitely some people charging more than that. There's a few people charging less, but in general, if you're charging 300 for your boutique Polar, Zoom, opalescence, then 500 for Enlighten is about right. What can you expect? Patient starts out A3.5. Most people say with their regular technique, especially if we're talking regular time frames, weeks rather than months, with all the problems that causes. Most people say they can get that A3.5 patient to around an A2 with some degree of predictability and stability. With Enlighten, same patient, same time frame, we've got to get to B1, we guarantee that. But where you really want to aim for in every case is saturation, the point where the tooth can't get any whiter. For most patients, saturation is 2 or 3 shades whiter than B1. Why do we like it? It turns out all the enamel has the same saturation point. So whether you talk about enamel on the tip of the tooth or the neck, on the canine or the lateral, or even if you've got a really dark non-vital tooth or a multicolored tooth, the closer you get to saturation, the closer you get to that even result that your patient's looking for. If you've done much whitening, by a long way, the biggest complaint is the neck, not as white as the tip, or the canine, not as white as the lateral. This is how we're trying to get around that issue. At saturation, the tip, the neck, the canine, lateral are all the same color. Is it too white? It's a very common concern, especially if you've got 2 different whitening systems. Patient will say, I don't want my teeth to go too white. When a patient says that, they're looking for reassurance that they're not going to look strange. Give them the reassurance. We've done well over 250,000 treatments. And, I still don't remember a patient who was unhappy about how white the teeth went at the end of treatment. In fact, you'll see later on, Enlighten's the system that's least likely to cause complications, the white spots, the chalkiness, the opacities, the things that make teeth look strange. So don't take them too seriously when they say that. Pretend to take them seriously if you want. For me, I find as a tip, when someone says that, they're actually going to be sometimes harder to please because they've got some crazy notion in their head, and then you deliver B1 and the patient's a bit disappointed. The 2 most common situations, on a simple case, the home part will take you all the way to B1. The office part will take you to saturation. On a more difficult case, the home part will take you close to B1 and the office part will take you to B1. So even though the office bit does a smaller, if you like, percentage of the whitening, sometimes that last bit is the difference between a nice case and a delicious case. So how's it done? By optimizing these 4 areas. People will tell you whitening is about one of these 4. Whitening is about all of these 4. Any one of them goes wrong, the treatment will go wrong. Of the 4, the 2 that you've got most control over are the impression or scan and the sensitivity control. The other 2 are really important, but you've got less control over those. So we'll be diving deeper into those first 2. We still prefer impressions. We're fully set up for digital. We're getting thousands of scans every week, but if I was having my own teeth bleached, I would still go with an impression. And the reason is the stone model is gas permeable. The printed model isn't gas permeable. The gas permeability of the model is an important factor to getting a really tight fitting tray. So we're working on it. We're improving them every week, in fact. But for now, we're getting tighter fitting trays on stone models than we are on plastic models. With Enlighten, both the impression material and the impression trays come with the system, so use them. If you are scanning, we're on all 5 of the major scanners as Enlighten Labs, so you can find us there. But much more important than the materials and all that is the impression itself. There's a few things I'm going to point out to you about the impression. If you don't get those few things, definitely retake the impression. A lot better that you retake than the lab makes you retake. And then you've got to bring the patient back in and you take something premium and turn it into excuses. The lab works all centralized. We've got our own technicians, our own machines, our own materials, excellent quality control. We take the highest rated machines and actually double the pressure on those. So we're working at 10 times the amount of pressure than you get from regular vacuum forming, or twice the amount of pressure that you get from regular pressure forming. But it's not rocket science. You sense a really good impression, we'll send you a really good bleaching tray. Then you've got the gels. And as soon as you mention gels, everyone jumps straight into concentrations. If you're interested in the concentrations are accurate. They are what they say they are. Very rare in our industry, but that's not actually the key point. The key point is that as the concentration of this volatile liquid drops, as it nearly always does, the pH also drops. The gels become more acidic. And it's the acidic nature of broken down gels that causes more sensitivity, more white spots, more chalkiness, more opacities. How do I know ours are accurate? We've got very short supply chains. We've shortened the supply chain by 2/3. So the time between factory and dentist is a lot shorter. The whole supply chain's refrigerated. The gel's never ever been out of the fridge before it gets to you. Important, you keep them in the fridge and your patients keep them in the fridge as well. As far as ingredients, the biggest difference with Enlighten gels is something they don't have. Enlighten gels don't have any desensitizers in them. We found by separating the desensitizer from the gel, you get a better whitening result, a more predictable result. There is a downside, and the downside is you've got to get used to a couple of important desensitizer steps that you've never done before. So pay special attention to those steps because they're new to you, and they're also quite technique sensitive as well. So pay special attention to the technique when we get to that. So it's 3 visits. Visit 1, take a really good impression, use the materials that come with it. On impression day, stop whatever toothpaste the patient's using and start Enlighten Tooth Serum. That's the nanohydroxyapatite toothpaste that comes with every kit. Tooth Serum addresses white spots, chalkiness, and opacities. The patient's going to brush with that instead of their regular toothpaste from the first visit for the 2 weeks while they're waiting for their trays to be made and throughout the whole bleaching process as well. Visit 2, 2 weeks later, fit the trays, show the patient how to use everything. There are special tray care instructions. And at the end of that visit, you're going to do this super important in-office desensitizing step. Pay special attention to this step. You've never done it before. It's a critical step as far as managing sensitivity. The patient then goes off, does their home whitening. There are desensitizers in the home kits as well for the patient to apply to their own teeth that build on this in-office desensitizing that you did. And the vast majority go for 2 weeks and then come back for a simple 40-minute in-office appointment. We don't use lasers and lights. We don't use gingival protection, but we will be using the patient's tray for that 3rd visit. So someone needs to remind them to bring the tray back in for visit 3. Right at the end, send them home with the Eva White toothpaste that comes with every kit. Try these toothpastes for yourself. If you have sensitive teeth, try Tooth Serum. Otherwise, try Eva White. We're selling loads of these all over the world right now. What people say is that the teeth feel much cleaner for much longer with the Eva White toothpaste. The biggest difference between the home gels and the office gels are the home gels break down very slowly. That's why we wear them overnight. The office gels break down very, very quickly, chemically accelerated. But the second thing is the viscosity of the home gels. The home gels are very sticky. The office gels are quite watery. That helps them penetrate the tooth a lot better. But that's also the reason we have to do it in the chair. These gels are way less resistant to saliva ingress and contamination because they're not sticky gels. The vast majority will get to B1 or whiter in 2 weeks. A small minority will take 4 weeks. Important you know which is which. Most practices charge an extra £100 for a difficult case. For the difficult cases, you have to give them extra gel from your top-up packs. You can get the top-up packs for free, but you will need to give them extra gel and charge them more. Generally, most practices charge around £100 more for a 4-week case than a 2-week case. There is a 3rd category. We're going to call that intermediate. This is for one specific clinical situation, for a bruxist. You're going to find in part 2, bruxism's by a long, long way the biggest problem. So for bruxis, we tell them at the beginning, it might end up as 4 weeks, but we need to see you after 2 weeks. So do the regular first 2 weeks like everyone else, bring them back in. Depending on progress, we make a change for week 3 and week 4 with the bruxists. So in conclusion, 2 weeks at home, 40 minutes in the chair, no lights. We need the tray for the in-office part, no gingival protection. So what does it all look like? There's your Enlighten home kit, the green one in the middle. In that box, you're going to find enough gel for a simple 2-week treatment. So week 1 is always at 10% carbamide peroxide. That's the colorless syringe. Week 2 and any other week after that is all at 16% carbamide. They're the green syringes. So point out to the patient which is which. For a difficult case, you're going to give your patient 2 more green syringes out of your top-up packs. You'll need top-up packs for these difficult cases and for the topping up itself. Remember, every patient's going to walk away with 1 syringe per year. You can get the top-up packs for free. They'll say buy 12 kits, get 12 syringes free. Also in the home kits, you're going to find these EvoSeal desensitizer swabs. These are little unit dose sticks the patient's going to be applying to their own teeth. I'll show you exactly how they use these later. But when they use these, they're building on the in-office desensitizing step that you did on visit 2 when you fitted the trays. We're going to ask everyone to use them the first few nights. After that, we'll leave them up to the patient. Tooth serum we talked about, they're going to brush with that instead of their regular toothpaste from the first visit and throughout the whole treatment. Done the home part, they come back for the office part. Remember, we'll need the tray for that. I'll show you the procedure for that later on. The office gel's chemically accelerated at 6% hydrogen peroxide, a much more watery gel. Right at the end, send them home with the Eva White toothpaste that comes with every kit. Try it for yourself. So there's your home kit. There's an ice pack built into the lower compartment, 10 and 16% syringes and the swabs. There's the office kit, ice pack built in. That's actually a 3-patient office kit. That's the smallest one we do. That's also the minimum order, 3 kits. Remember, Enlighten gels have to be refrigerated, both by you and by your patient. There are other ways of stabilizing whitening gels that we definitely don't agree with. For the hygienists, both of the toothpastes have got fluoride in them. Both of the toothpastes are a lower abrasion than Colgate. Both in the 70s, they're RDAs, and both of the toothpaste are designed to be used without any water. Just straight on the brush, straight in the mouth, no water. Not the end of the world, someone uses water. It's written all over the boxes. That's the way they've been designed. The tooth serums, the nanohydroxyapatite toothpaste. Eva White has a pentasodium triphosphate surfactant modifier in there that affects the surface tension of saliva. A totally different feeling toothpaste. So before you do anything, assess the case. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 4 weeks? Make sure you and your patient are happy with that. Visit 1, take a really good impression. Use the materials that come with it. On impression day, you're going to stop whatever toothpaste they're using and start tooth serum. At the end of that visit, you're going to go onto the Enlighten website, log in using your practice password, which you'll have, and book the patient in. It's a simple process: name, date of birth, hit book. When you hit book, the system will give you a return date. The date we guarantee the trays will come back to you. So generally 2 weeks time. Book the patient after that date. You can have them back quicker. You can express the case, can come back within 3 working days. Not a good idea though. Firstly, tooth serum takes longer than 3 days to have its effect. Secondly, it costs more, costs an extra £33 to express the case. So unless you really have to, don't bother expressing it. Visit 2, 2 weeks later, fit the trays, show the patient the different syringes, show them how to use the swabs. I'll show you that in a moment. Special tray care instructions. And at the end of that visit, you're going to do this super important in-office desensitizing step using this bottle of Hurry Seal. Kind of looks like a bottle of Bond. You'll get it with your first order. It's good for around 50 patients. So you'll need a new one after each 50 cases that you do. Pay special attention to this step. It's a critical step that you've never done before. Patient then goes off, does their home whitening, vast majority for 2 weeks, and then come back for a simple 40-minute in-office appointment. Remember, we'll need a tray for that right at the end. Send them home with the Eva White toothpaste that comes with every kit. All right, let's jump into the impression. Remember, we do prefer impressions. You're going to take the impression with metal perforated impression trays. You'll get small, medium, and large with the first order. They come back from the lab every time you use them. If the practice is already using Enlighten, they'll already have them. The material you're going to use is called Hydrogum 5, a 5-day stable alginate material that comes with every kit. You'll get 1 sachet for the upper, 1 sachet for the lower, so use it. The most important thing about the impression is we want absolutely no drags on the outer buccal or labial gingival margin. You get a drag anywhere on this outer gingival margin, definitely retake the impression. The best material to retake with would be Hydrogum 5. You can take it from the next patient and replace them. Let's say you haven't got any more Hydrogum 5. The next best material is just alginate. We prefer alginate to silicone impressions. Where people get drags tends to be in the anterior area. One way to avoid that, put a bit of alginate on your finger, rub it into the anterior before taking the impression. The second most important thing, if you can avoid it, is the drag distal to the last tooth. It's not always possible to avoid that. But if you can get an accurate impression of the distal of the last tooth, that has a disproportionate effect on the stability of the tray. It's a bit like the heel of the arch. Again, one way to do that, put a bit of alginate on your finger, rub it behind the last tooth on either side before taking the impression. The final problem area tends to be in the lower anterior, not in the impression, but in the bleaching tray. Sometimes you put the bleaching tray in the mouth and you see a gap between the bleaching tray and the tooth in the lower anterior. And the reason we get this problem in the lower is that some people, when they take the lower tray out, they grab the handle and rock the whole thing up and down. If you do that before the material properly sets, it causes this problem. So don't do that. Let the material fully set. When you're taking the lower tray out, break the seal at the back, just like you do with the upper tray. Hydrogum 5 is like any other alginate when it comes to mixing, but one big difference, when you send it to the lab, you don't wrap the impression in wet tissue. You put a wet tissue in there somewhere, but don't wrap the impression itself in wet tissues. Enlighten bleaching trays are made of a thicker plastic. You can see the extra thickness on the fitting surface of that one. It needs to be thicker to withstand the extra pressure in the process. We finish the trays at the gingival margin, not above or below. We do use reservoirs, spacers, but we stop the reservoirs at the premolars. And the reason for that is we've done a lot of split arch testing with these. We think there are benefits when it comes to whitening, but also disadvantages as well. We think they reduce retention and increase sensitivity. And for those reasons, we don't put any in the molar area. The most important thing is every time you hand a tray to the patient, someone needs to go through tray care instructions. They need to understand it's possible to damage the trays. Most of it's common sense. Wash them with cold water only. Never squash the thing, but definitely not in the tray case. The blue ones aren't as obvious. However much you want to, definitely never try the tray on the model. Putting the tray on the model stretches it in a different way to putting it in the mouth. So for the same reason, never give the patient the models, because that's what they'll keep doing as well. The other really important thing is if you've got one or two teeth which are darker and you want to accelerate whitening on those teeth, ask the technician to add a second reservoir on the palatal or lingual side. Times you might use that. Dark canines on high expectations patients. Non-vital teeth, most of the time, there's no need for internal bleaching. I'll show you more later, but you're going to add the second reservoir. Remember, every time you add the second reservoir, you're going to reduce retention. If it's a vital tooth, you're going to increase sensitivity. So don't go adding them everywhere. The most I would add is 2 of them per tray. Here's an example. 2 centrals are darker. In this case, they are vital teeth. This is where you might go ahead and add plate reservoirs on those 2 to try and get them to saturation along with everything else. Bearing in mind with vital teeth, you're going to increase sensitivity by doing that. So if you're using a really brilliant tray with a really brilliant gel, you're going to have high concentrations for long periods. That's going to make teeth white, but that's also going to give you lots of sensitivity. So you've got to manage the sensitivity to manage compliance. Don't let anyone tell you that compliance in whitening is a patient-related issue. Sounds like a good idea. Patients not complying is the patient's fault. No, compliance is a sensitivity-related issue. If you can manage sensitivity, you'll get pretty much good compliance from everyone. So how do we manage sensitivity with Enlighten? The in-office desensitizing step on visit 2. Same visit as you fitted the trays, you showed them how to use everything. Before they go off and do their first night of home whitening, you're going to desensitize their teeth using Hurry Seal. So pay special attention to this step. Hurry Seal is applied on a cotton pledget to the gingival margins, bearing in mind lower anteriors are the teeth that cause the most sensitivity. We're just going to stick to the anteriors. You don't need to bother with the posteriors. But the way you apply it is the key. I use a retractor, keep everything out of the way, and then it's 2 coats of Hurry Seal on a cotton pledget along the gingival margins. But in between the 2 coats, it's a strange sequence. First, you dry it off. That feels right, just like you would dry off Bond. Then you wash the tooth with water. That definitely doesn't feel right, but it is. Dry again, and then another coat. So 2 coats, drying and washing in between the 2 coats. If you get this right, you build the initial plug in the tooth. Then when the patient uses the swabs, which have the same stuff in them, they build on the initial plug that you made. If you don't get this right, the patient never gets the initial plug, then the swabs are nowhere near as effective, then sensitivity can be problematic. So make sure you get that step right. Understand every single Enlighten failure goes through me. Every single time sensitivity was the cause, the dentist either missed this step or got this step wrong. So make sure you get this step right. The swabs are unit dose. The patient breaks a little green line, liquid flows down to the other side, and then we just ask them to apply to the gingival margins. The first few nights, ask everyone to do that. After that, leave it up to the patient. Most patients don't actually end up using all of them. I've got to ask you now, does anyone have a free Enlighten kit? Because the free Enlighten kits are slightly different. You would have got it at the Chris Orr course, the Mini Smile Makeover course, the Smile Academy course. Anyone got a free one? Is that a hand? It came and went. I didn't see it. Someone got a free one? Just to put it in the, if you haven't got a microphone, stick it in the chat if you got a free one. No? Good. We get a bigger problem with hydrostatic pressure. It shows up in these bubbles. We don't like the bubbles, basically. So always train your patient every time they put the tray in the mouth to push back, push the labial backwards. When they push backwards, they get rid of the bubbles, they spread the gel across the reservoir, and a bit of excess gel should come out as well. That's how they know they got the right amount of gel in there. When a bit of excess comes out, ask them to remove the excess with cotton wool and go to sleep. Definitely don't ask them to rinse their mouth to get rid of the excess gel. The in-office part is very simple. We no longer use retractors. So this picture is out of date. All we do now is we fill the tray with the in-office gel, which remember is a lot more watery than the home gel. Put the tray in the mouth, push back like we just said. This time a lot more gel will escape because it's a more watery gel. So we're going to clean up any excess that gets on the gums using the surgical suction tip on your suction. And then we want the teeth in this position because we want to put a saliva ejector or low volume suction in between the teeth. But in order to get the teeth into this position, instead of biting on retractors, they're going to bite on 2 cotton wool rolls stacked on this side, 2 cotton wool rolls stacked on that side. You get an opening just like this. Put the low volume suction in between the teeth. And that's it. Just bring the lip over the top, maybe a couple of cotton wool rolls under the lip. Wait for 20 minutes. They might watch a movie or listen to music. Understand that if you're lucky enough to get word of mouth at this point, either you're the world's most charming dentist, or they're going to give you word of mouth about what they were doing in that 20 minutes. If they're enjoying that 20 minutes, you're much more likely to get word of mouth at this point. I mean, nothing's happened yet, right? So at the end of 20 minutes, raise the lip. You'll see loads of foam and bubbles under here. That's the way it should be. Take the tray out, suction out the old stuff using the surgical suction tip, put some fresh gel in, and go for another 20 minutes. Definitely don't wash the tray in between the 2 applications. It's very easy to leave water around. This gel doesn't like water. It's already quite a watery gel. All right, I know it's a lot to take in, but all I've really said is take a really good impression and get that desensitizing step right. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to the clinical section. Before we do that, any questions so far? Someone's got a question, surely. If you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it too, right? Okay, that's it. I'm just going to send out videos from now on. So how can you tell before you start if it's a simple case or a difficult case? You want to know because you want to tell your patient, is it 2 weeks or is it 4 weeks? These are the 6 variables you want to pay attention to. Even out of these 6, there's these 2, which are by far the most important. It probably is the same 6 things for any bleaching system. What we've got is loads and loads of data. So data on over 3,000 Enlighten 2-week failures. Just to get that into context for you, you know, all the studies people quote on whitening, the vast majority of them, definitely the ones that are cited the most on fewer than 50 patients. So everyone knows the older the patient is, the more difficult the case is. With Enlighten, if the patient's over 60, think of that as 4 weeks to get to B1 or whiter. The proximity of any problem to the gingival margin, we don't differentiate between problems. So white spots, brown spots, crack lines, fluorosis, even tetracycline banding, all of them problems. The closer the problem is to the gingival, the bigger the problem is. If the problem is on the gingival, that area is definitely going to take 4 weeks. Enamel thickness has a really, really big effect on bleaching. It's difficult to measure it, but understand very, very thin enamel is very, very difficult to bleach. So if the enamel's so thin, you can clearly see all the beautiful dentine anatomy showing through, that area is definitely going to take 4 weeks. Erosion slows down bleaching too. That's often missed. By a long, long way, the biggest problem is bruxism. So 3/4 of Enlighten 2-week failures are due to bruxism. Bruxists have a bunch of issues. They grind their teeth, saliva gets in, gel escapes. They also have more sensitivity than everyone else. They also tend to have thinner enamel as well. So the most important thing of all is to identify bruxism. So when you're looking at the case, the first question you're always going to ask yourself is this patient a bruxist? If you think they are, put them into the intermediate category. Tell them it might take 4 weeks. Week 1 and 2, we treat them just like everyone else, but then we're going to bring them back in. If you're not seeing good progress, in week 3 and 4, we switch to daytime bleaching instead of nighttime. Obviously, they don't grind their teeth as much when they're awake. And when I say daytime, I don't mean use a different gel. I mean use the same gel for as many hours as they can awake instead of asleep. Everyone says, what's the minimum? The minimum is the maximum, as many hours as they can. As far as expectations, depends on your marketing. If you aggressively market the B1 guarantee, which most do, then you tend to attract patients to you sometimes who've had whitening before. It's definitely the most common question we get from patients is they've tried something, whatever it was, disappointed. This time they did their research. If you do your research, you do end up with Enlighten. This time they want to get it right. It's a much more difficult patient. For me, the real sort of alarm bells are when they point to the canine. Anytime anyone points to the canine, I'm going to add a palatal reservoir, bearing in mind I'll increase sensitivity, and I'm going to stick them into the 4-week category just to ensure the canine gets to saturation. Finally, tetracycline, you can treat predictably as long as you haven't got lots of the other problems. I'll show you a nice way of looking at that later. All right, so we go back to the original case. I said this case is easier than it looks. Why is this case easier than it looks? First question you're always going to ask yourself, is this patient a bruxist? In this case, we didn't think so. Second question you're always going to ask yourself, is there very thin enamel anywhere? In this case, plenty of enamel everywhere. When these two things are right, everything's going to be all right. I'm not over the moon about the white and brown patches, but we've got an unusual situation and a highly favorable situation here where the neck of the tooth is whiter than the rest of the tooth. I'm much more worried about this patch than these ones because this is the one that's getting closest to the gingival margin along with those ones. What the patient needs to know about white and brown patches, whatever the cause is that they could go chalky during treatment. With Enlighten, it's very rare that they stay chalky, but I'll show you what to do if that does happen. So I'd probably, if I was meeting the patient for the first time, I'd still probably put them into the intermediate category. I'll tell them, look, 2 weeks is going to make a massive difference. But because of these complications, in your case, it might take 4 weeks just to cover myself. As it happened, 2 weeks was fine. Canine lateral, the same color. Tip and neck, the same color. Multicolor teeth, the same color. We're at the whitening saturation point. Obviously, crowns and fillings don't change color. You want to bond anything to these teeth, got to wait another 2 weeks before the bond strength comes back to where it was before. Remember, with any whitening patient at all, Enlighten or not, there are 3 things you have to point out to them. Number 1, crowns and fillings. They're not going to change color. Number 2, white and brown spots. They could go chalky. Number 3, exposed dentine. Exposed dentine is not going to change color. The patient needs to know that. Exposed dentine is a good predictor of sensitivity. So with Enlighten, both you and your patient, if they're up to it, can target exposed dentine with the desensitizers. This is a difficult case. Patient in her 60s with these very dark premolars, very dark teeth, older patient, should be a warning. It might take 4 weeks. This is 2 weeks. See, not bad, but whiter than B1, but not good because of this kind of cloudy appearance you can see on the 4s. Pay special attention to this cloudy appearance. It's different to the white spots you saw in the previous pictures. This is the characteristic appearance of incomplete bleaching. And we really don't know why some patients go through this. What we do know is the patients who go through this also regress more quickly. So the treatment here is to keep going. Hopefully you warn them at the beginning that it might take 4 weeks. But when we keep going, we're going to keep going on all the teeth together, not just the 1 or 2 that look like they need it. We don't want these other ones regressing while those ones progress. In fact, as a general rule with Enlighten, you're going to bleach all the teeth all the time. It's very rare that we focus on 1 or 2. Even if I start with 1 single central dark non-vital tooth, I'm going to bleach all the teeth to the same saturation endpoint. Okay, let's start with Roop. What do you reckon, Roop? This patient's in her 30s. Is it simple or difficult? What's the first question you're going to ask yourself?
Are they a bruxist?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. By the way, it's impossible to tell from a photograph if they're a bruxist or not. Yeah, don't try and tell from photos. The patient might have started being a bruxist 2 weeks ago. Yeah, You can't tell that they're a bruxist just by looking at the photograph. You need to feel the muscles and all the other signs. What else can you tell me, Roop?
There's some brown marks on the central incisors that are quite close to the gingival margin.
Absolutely. So I'm much more worried about these cracked lines than these problems down here, because they're getting closer. I mean, tobacco stain fracture lines famously difficult wherever you find them, but particularly difficult as they approach gingival margin. Absolutely right. Tilly, what else? Anything else?
Enamel thickness.
Where are you looking?
So maybe that upper right lateral, the edge looks a little bit translucent.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So you're absolutely right after bruxism to look for enamel thickness. But when I say thin enamel, I mean much thinner than that. So when you can clearly see the dentine showing through, and by the way, where you will see that generally is in the gingival, not on the incisor, but you're absolutely right to look for it. Anything else?
Age of the patient.
Sorry, say again.
Sorry, age of the patient. How old?
Yeah, she's in her 30s. She looks older, doesn't she? But she's in her 30s. Go again. Go for it, Hiroshi.
The patient's expectations.
Yeah, definitely right. You know, understand, if a patient opts for expensive whitening, they're entitled to a higher level of expectation. Yeah, they don't know what's possible and what isn't. They've gone for the super expensive one, right? So they might want to come out of this looking like, you know, Julia Roberts. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Particularly in this case, because we said those cracks are difficult to whiten, patient needs to know that might take 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And in fact, you're absolutely right to point that out, Hiroshi, because look, this is the 2-week treatment. And for us, this is a massive success, right? Whiter than B1, canine lateral, the same color. But for the patient, there's a massive failure. If the crack was the reason for having the treatment, we haven't fixed the crack. So what we're going to do next, if the patient's unhappy with that, Hiroshi?
Sorry, say that again.
What we're going to do if the patient's unhappy with that after 2 weeks?
I explained to them that is the nature of the case and that it may take a bit longer.
Yeah, although go for another 2 weeks. If you've pointed it out from the beginning, you're looking like an expert at this point. If you haven't, you're looking like you're making excuses. Yeah, so absolutely right. Interesting question though, for, where should we go? Zara, what if this was 4 weeks and the patient's unhappy? What do you reckon you want to do next?
I would, well, first of all, before I do the two, I would have done the palatal as well.
Yeah, good point. Explain
to them.
But you've got an unhappy patient after 4 weeks. You've got a palatal reservoir on there anyway. What are you going to do next?
In surgery.
Let's say you've done that as well.
Refer.
Yeah, I like your style. Anytime your patient's unhappy after 4 weeks, I mean, first of all, anytime your patient's unhappy with whitening, generally there's two things you can do. One, keep going, or two, do something restorative. Yeah, if you're confident that everything went right, so if you've got a good fitting tray and everyone did what they were supposed to do, compliance and all of that, then those are the only two choices. But you're absolutely right there, Zara. What I would say is, anytime your patient's unhappy after 4 weeks, definitely contact Enlighten. We definitely want to hear from you. Number one, it's very rare, so you might be doing something wrong, or the patient's doing something wrong. We're going to fix that thing. Number two, there's a guarantee on the process. What would I tell you? If you send me these pictures and this was 4 weeks, in this particular case, we're so close to a result here, it would be a shame to do anything other than keep going. So in this particular case, I'd say keep going. There are cases like this where more bleaching is the answer, but there are other cases where it doesn't matter how much you bleach, bleaching by itself isn't going to be the answer. There's two in particular you need to look out for. One's this one, where you've got very deep stains and dentine covered by very thin enamel. It's unlikely bleaching is going to take care of that. There's not enough enamel to opaque everything going on in the dentine. In this particular case, it's composite veneers using flowable opacers after bleaching. The other situation where more bleaching isn't going to help is when one of these white spots goes chalky. Again, doesn't matter how much you bleach, you're not going to change that by bleaching more. The answer to this one, or to any white spot your patient's determined to get rid of, is to start with the least invasive thing and become more invasive as you need to. For me, this is the best order. I would start with microabrasion. Optident do the best kit. You can make your own. I prefer the Opalasta kit, Optident. For me, it works best if you follow up with further bleaching. If that doesn't work, there's a thing called Icon by DMG. There's a strong hydrochloric acid to etch the area and then inject unfilled resin in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The reason I've got this after microevasion is there's a lot of Icon users. If it doesn't work, we'll go straight into a composite restoration. So for that reason, there are brown spots that microevasion will reduce to the point that Icon will delete, but the other way around isn't really the case. The time to have this conversation isn't when the chalkiness comes up. The time to have this conversation is at the beginning with that case with all the white and brown spots. You tell the patient one or more of these may come into play. I can't tell you which one or any of them until I've done the whitening first. Okay, once you get a bit more confident, start recommending it in more places. Enlighten's particularly good in restorative situations. You know the color's going to change, you know the color's going to stay. You can match to the new color without worrying about all the colors changing all the time. It could be a simple one like this. We call these mini smile makeovers, minimally invasive smile makeover. This is Enlighten, edge bonding upper left lateral, half a composite veneer on the upper right lateral. If you use the right composite, you can stop halfway up the tooth without a margin. With the microfill composites, you can do that. Why do we call this a mini smile makeover? Why don't we call this bleaching and 2 fillings? Wow, what you're doing is a bit different to 2 fillings. What you're charging is a bit different too. This was £1,400, £600 Enlighten, £400 per tooth for the mini smile makeover. My basic point is just because it's composite doesn't make it a filling. If we're closing this diastema with composite, I'm not going to be mentioning the word filling. If we're changing these pegs with composite, I'm not going to be talking about fillings. The reality is, once you do a lot more bleaching, which I hope you will end up doing a lot more anterior composites as well. If you haven't already, get yourself onto a composite hands-on course. So we do one called Mini Smile Makeover with Dipesh Parmez. Definitely one of the best teachers in the world right now on this subject. It's a 2-day anterior. You get a free Enlighten kit on that course as well. Pays for half the course if you do that treatment. Bruxism, by a long way, the biggest problem. You've got all these different issues in the same patient. This is enamel, but it's thin enamel. If that was dentine, there'd be no way of getting from the top to the bottom with bleaching. Remember what we said? Week 1 and 2, treat them like everyone else. If you're not seeing good results, week 3 and 4, switch to daytime using the same gel. Bear in mind, thin enamel is rare on the incisal. It's much more common on the gingival. Pay attention to very, very thin enamel at the gingival because that area won't get to saturation. If you tell them at the beginning you're looking like an expert. Remember this one? I said this is a harder case than it looks. Why is this one harder than it looks? This patient had just had whitening, disappointed, comes back to get it right this time. That's always harder. Someone's already done some of the easy bits. You see these white patches, they need to, any of these could go chalky during treatment. But the reason this case was hard was because nothing happened at all in week 1 and 2. Young patient, 19-year-old patient, nothing happened at all in week 1 and 2. We switched to daytime, 3 shades whiter than B1 in week 3 and 4. Notice even 3 shades whiter than B1 still looks natural. So you know that thing, I don't want my teeth to go too white? It's not to do with the shade you get to, it's to do with the quality of the result. Look out for bruxism, definitely the biggest issue. Tetracycline, we class them into difficult tetracycline and not so difficult. This is a not so difficult tetracycline case. So we're darker than C4 banded, we go to whiter than B1. Why is this one not so difficult? What you do is you go down this list, as each of these is favorable, makes it more favorable. So this patient, all of them are favorable. It's a young patient, the banding's miles away from the gingival margin. That's super, super useful and rare. There's plenty of enamel. That's very important. Not a bruxist, very important. Expectations tend to be low anyway. Everything's working in your favor, makes it an easier one. What's a difficult one? As each of these go against you. As the age goes up, definitely. As the banding gets closer to gingival, it gets exponentially harder. Same thing as the enamel gets thinner, as it often does. Bruxism's a total disaster with tetracycline. There comes a point where bleaching isn't the right treatment. We call that point a PE combination. And the way that looks is a high smile line, that's important, with the banding at the gingival margin, that's the P, with very thin enamel, that's the E. Reason I'm highlighting is one of the only times you can make things look worse by bleaching someone's teeth. What about non-vital? Traditionally, the treatment was internal bleaching. What we found is most of the time there's no need for internal bleaching. If you add a palatal reservoir on the darker tooth, bleach all the teeth together for 4 weeks, most of the time the patient's happy with that. There are some patients who won't be happy with that. Those patients would go internal bleaching. If you're going to do internal, the best gel I know for that by a long, long way is the Enlighten in-office gel. That more watery gel just penetrates the root canal system a lot better. It's a nice thin tip for application. Bring the patient in Friday afternoon, open access, send them home over the weekend with that syringe, have them fill it as many times as they can over the weekend, bring them back in Monday morning and close the access. If you do it the way I'm saying, they'll already have trays for nighttime wear anyway, because they already did 4 weeks of external. The vast majority won't need that. All right, who does a lot of bleaching? Anyone do a lot? What is a lot? Anyone do a lot? Go on, someone. What is a lot? So we've got 4,000 users in the UK. And there's about 100 we call big users. What we call a lot is 1 a day per dentist. So why is it? I can show you lots and lots of examples of practices where in the same practice, there's 2 dentists, one doing 10 times as much whitening as the other. Why is that the case? I can think of loads of examples of that. You know, some people like to talk about the health benefits of whitening. I've never needed to myself, but you can. You know, there are health benefits to whitening. It's good for the gums. It's reduces plaque adhesion to the teeth. It reduces root caries. Some people will take shade in all exams. That's a really, really good idea. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Practices who do a lot of whitening mention whitening a lot. That seems obvious. But what's not obvious is how. How do you mention whitening a lot without annoying people, offending people, embarrassing people, coming off as a pushy salesman? That's one we all worry about. Am I coming off as a pushy salesman right now, Tilly? Yeah, good answer. Good answer. Good answer. Shake your head. No, there's a serious point, but I honestly, genuinely believe I'm doing you a massive favor by giving you the information. Because I feel that way, it comes across as education. Yeah. So when you honestly, genuinely believe you're doing your patient a favor by discussing tooth shade because you know you can deliver, then it comes across as education. That's the biggest difference between practices who do loads and practices who don't. They see it as education. They don't see it as sales. There are many, many advantages to that. When you see it as education, it doesn't matter if a patient says no. I mean, we spend our whole day, Zara, you spend your whole day talking about interdental brushing, right? Lost you. Are you there? Was that a yes? Just not. Yeah. I mean, why do you do that? Is it to sell TP brushes?
I care about oral hygiene.
Yeah. So you know, and the nice thing is, if a patient goes out and doesn't buy those interdental brushes, it doesn't mean you're not going to talk to the next patient about it, because it's education. We're good at it. Because with sales, generally, most of us are bad at it. People worry about what words to use. Use the exact same words as you would use if your family member was in the chair. So understand those words are different for me than they are for each of you. If I prescribe the words to you, that doesn't work, but that's the words to use. If the patient looks like, you know, an older lady, like your mum, then talk to them as if it was your mum in the chair, and so forth. You'd be amazed the number of dentists who tell me that when a family member comes in, they talk about bleaching, but when a real patient comes in, they don't talk about bleaching. Let that sink in. There are good reasons for that. We're all worried about this patient, and we should. I don't know what you think. I think, well, I mean, by the way, I've got no problem with, you know, with what the person's saying. I'm talking about anyone who's going to get angry, embarrassed, offended by you bringing up shade before they do. I feel, by the way, myself, exactly this way myself about Botox. Yeah. Like, I don't care what happens. I'm not sticking a needle in my face with poison in it. Yeah. Now, let's say I turn up to Tilly's practice and someone says, hey, have you ever thought about Botox? Yeah. All right, I'm not going to get angry, but I can understand on the wrong day, the wrong person might. Let's say 1 out of 20 is like this. Even 1 out of 10 is like this. A lot of us used to see 20 patients a day. So that's 1 or 2 patients a day are going to get annoyed. And none of us want to annoy that number of people. So a lot of us kind of tiptoe around the whole subject, don't mention shade at all, or nowhere near as much as we should. And then on the other side of the coin, I don't know what you think, I think at least half our patients are in this category. These guys never get to hear about it because we're so busy avoiding this guy. It's a real problem. In 160 practices, we call them regional centers of excellence. We try to address this issue by having this patient filtered out at reception. It's very simple. Receptionist says, all our dentists are going to take shade on all our patients because we've become an Enlighten center, because we've got whitening offers, because the color of teeth changes and we want to monitor that. We've done this 160 times. So I can tell you up and down the country, NHS and private, Harley Street and Sunderland, the results are the same. 80% of patients say yes to that. 20% say no. The whole point is to filter that 20% out. The people who say yes get a piece of paper that positions the practice as a center of excellence for minimally invasive dentistry. The point of the piece of paper isn't only to do more whitening. We want people who don't go ahead to talk about the practice as well as the ones who do. See here it says all our team have had it done. It makes a lot of sense for you and your team to have it done. We have staff kits for you at half price. You give us a GDC number and you know, you can use those staff kits. Makes a lot of sense to have had the treatment yourself. As far as offers, we've done this experiment many, many times with Enlighten. Money off offers don't work as well as value add offers. So free electric toothbrush with Enlighten works a lot better than £100 off Enlighten. Or free first year's top up, which you can get for free from us, works a lot better than £50 off Enlighten. The worst thing you can do is to put the price up and then bring it down in an offer. Yeah, because all your team will see straight through that. If you want to know what a good offer is, as soon as you say what the offer is, you want the team to get on the phone, call friends and family and say, come in and get it. Yeah, that's a good offer. The biggest difference between practices who do loads and the ones who don't is the practices who do loads see this fact as your patient's biggest concern. Don't get it wrong. Your patient's more interested in the color of their teeth than everything else you talk about put together. And amazingly, when they come into the dentist, we don't mention the color of teeth often. The biggest difference is the ones who do loads see all of it as education. The ones who don't see it as sales. It's difficult to hear lots of no's when you're in sales mode. In education mode, it's super cool. You know, you've got no problem. I'm just educating. Only once you figure that out would I bother with social media, trying to get patients in from the outside. There's plenty more whitening in practices than you realize. We've changed, you know, done that little thing at reception, take practices from doing 1 a month to doing 15 a month, just within the patients that you've got in your practice. But don't ignore social media either. If you post a case and you tag at Enlighten Smiles, our page manager will then amplify that case. I think we've got 3 times the number of followers as we had when we took that picture. There are GIFs. If you search in the GIF section, Enlighten Smiles, a whole lot of things you can put into your Instagram stories. We've got training for Instagram and content packs, downloadable consent forms, a bunch of digital assets for websites and social media as well. If you do a lot of Invisalign, if you finish on the Vivera retainer, we treat that just like an Enlighten tray. So you don't need to make Enlighten trays for that patient. Time to have that conversation is when the teeth are straight at the end of Invisalign. Teeth are straight, trust is high. They've just been through the hassle. That's the time. Do you want to upgrade your finish to a Vivera Enlighten finish? Even if you sold free whitening at the beginning, do you want a discount on a Vivera Enlighten finish? Our big users will convert 80% of their patients into a Vivera Enlighten finish. The hygienist is the most important person in the practice when it comes to whitening. Most practices don't realize it. Most hygienists don't realize it. If you want to know how important your hygienist is, for 2 weeks, do a little experiment, add an element of revenue share, and either add a nurse or lengthen appointments by 10 minutes. I've seen hygienists quadruple the whitening of the whole practice in that 2-week period. Try it. Enlighten's B1 guarantee says every case goes to B1 or whiter. If it doesn't happen, contact us. Our mission will be to make it happen, but if we can't, we'll send you a free kit. That's what the guarantee says. The shelf life guarantee means you never buy a syringe that goes out of date. You can't use it, we just send you a fresh one free of charge. The money back guarantees after your first treatment. For whatever reason, you decide it's just not right for you, you can send everything back, get a full refund on everything, including that first treatment. We're really strong on the marketing side, but don't think that by putting this stuff up on your walls, you no longer need to talk about it. Think of this stuff as the picture of the composite filling on your wall. Does not mean you no longer need to talk about composite fillings. The Center of Excellence program is where we partner with one practice in each area to really focus on that practice. Come in-house, train the team on the process, the biggest entry on our website. We're getting 130,000 visitors on the Find a Dentist section a month. The interest-free credit, a bunch of benefits. We've covered something like 70% of the country already, but if you're in a sort of smaller town or village, it's possible we haven't got a center in that area. The cost of Enlighten 179 includes everything: impression materials, toothpaste, desensitizers, obviously the gels, the trays, postage, everything. If you want to do just Enlighten Home without Enlighten Office, you can do that, but make sure your patient knows that's what you're doing. We get complaints from patients. I paid my money, got half of Enlighten. Understand that suddenly becomes a consent issue. So make sure your patient understands that you're only doing the home part. You can get just the gels, the same gels, the 10 and 16% by themselves. You're going to take care of other bits yourself. That's called an Evo Night kit. You can get just the syringes, or you can get those for free. Buy 12 kits, get 12 syringes free. The toothpaste sell for 10 or 12 pounds a tube. Try them for yourself. Mini Smile Makers, a 2-day anterior course. You get a free Enlighten kit on that course as well. I'll quickly show you how to book a case. I know we're coming to the end of our time. You Google Enlighten. First one that comes up is enlightensmiles.com. You log in using your practice password on the top right. Make sure you're on the right website. Sorry, this is the consumer website. You want the professional website. Log in and go to lab. From lab, it's book a new patient. From there, it's pretty self-explanatory. So name, date of birth. If you want to express the case, you tick this box. It'll come back quicker, but we said that's not a good idea. If you want to say something to the technician about a palatal reservoir, there's space there to talk to the technician. When you're ready, confirm and book. When you book, you get a return date. That's the date we guarantee the trays will come back to you. So book the patient after that date. If it's an impression, print that off. That becomes your lab docket. Put it in with the free post box that comes with every kit. Send it all off to the lab. If it's a scan, you can upload your scan on the previous page. You can email the scan, or on your scanner software, you can find Enlighten Labs. We're on all 5 of the major scanners. Again, we do prefer impressions. Hopefully you feel a bit more like a whitening expert now. You're now certified to do your first case, which we guarantee will go to B1 or whiter. Hopefully you understand the differences between the basic and the advanced systems.